Okay, good afternoon. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. It is September 4th at 4:01 p.m., our second day back after about a year hiatus. I want to answer some questions that came in. We'll take a few seconds, let people log in, but a few questions came in after yesterday's podcast. A lot of new viewers that hadn't watched it in the past. So I want to talk about that in a little bit. I'm also trying, I don't know how to make this happen, but to make this also simulcast on Instagram, I'm not sure if that will work or not, but we'll find out soon enough. That being said, okay, so some of the questions we got yesterday from people who are new, and one was about the noise ordinance that we had talked about. Yes, the town does have a noise ordinance. The state has a noise ordinance, and there are very different level. I mean, they may vary. They're not exactly the same. There's different allowances in these noise ordinances. There's allowances to go over at certain times for a certain amount of time, what have you. The issue here is a matter of being reasonable and logical. If the noise ordinance is 60, for example, decibels, which is not all that high, let's say it's the case. If it hits 68 6 or 7 times in an hour, should the police shut them down? If it hits 72 once or twice, which is the sound of loud conversation, for example, should it be shut down? And the question there is it a logical move to shut down an event that, one, 99% of the people who are in the area are completely fine with? Two, doesn't reach the point of being a logical distraction to your life. The arguments that they're making are our house is shaking and we can't live our lives, and there's simply no way that's true. There's this very simple question I run by what every single thing I'm told, every email I'm sent, every political person that says something: is this fundamentally true? Is your life so disrupted that this should be shut down? And there's no way it's true, and we know it because the police, town officials, elected officials, myself have gone across the street, literally had real conversations as music went up and down in volume. There's never been any damage concerns here. There's never been any significant, no windows have been shattered, nothing remotely close to that. And we live in a town that has these events, especially in the summer. That's Branford. So when somebody comes to town from out of town and starts this nonsense, we start saying, well, why did you move here? Like, this is what a shoreline town is in the summer. So it's not a question of, is there a letter to law? Did somebody go over it? Yes. For a couple minutes, a couple seconds, a few times an hour? Yes. Very likely that noise ordinance may have been exceeded. But the ordinance allows for logic. And then on top of that, the police department gets to decide, is this a reasonable use of this ordinance in that case? If we started to say yes, every single time a decibel meter went over 60, or whatever the number actually is, how do you then say, I'm going to enforce that here, but I'm not going to enforce it there? Who picks and chooses which ones you get to enforce? Because if you live in the center of town, you have concerts on a very regular basis, and it very likely goes well over 60 on a regular basis. If you live near the stand and there's music outside, if you live at the Thimble Island Brewery and there's music outside, if you live anywhere at Lenny's or what have you, the police cannot get in the game of starting to say, wait a minute, this one we want to stop, this one we don't, this one we want to stop, this one we don't. And so the point that I think should be overarching is that if you're an elected official, like Mr. Hartwell is, unfortunately, I will say, you should be the voice of reason, not the fuel pushing hysteria. You should be a voice of logic. And hey, guys, calm down. It's no big deal. We can get through this. It's not the end of the world. We have all these other issues if we start enforcing that. We know their houses aren't shaking. There's no foundations falling apart. The world's not ending. And more than anything else, this is what Branford is. And if you move to Branford, I expect you to know that this is what Branford is. To residents that have lived there for more than 20, 30, 40 years, it was a factory. Like, how the hell are you complaining? You would have taken a factory with 3 shifts going around the clock, polluting the river. And you say, hey, listen, let's trade that. Let's get rid of the factory. Let's get rid of the pollution, clean up the river. No more 3 shifts. Let's have a brewery there, and 3 or 4 times a year we'll have a concert. What person in their right mind would say no to that? And so that's the overall point. Like, it doesn't actually make any sense to for the police to be involved in something like this, as the police have told them repeatedly. This is not something new. Over and over and over again. James Intaglia, tear down the brewery and place for the Costco. So if you don't know who Intaglia is, good guy. But every single time we post something on Branford 7, he suggests Costco should go there. And I'm not kidding. Like, we could say, like, listen, a new pharmacy is opening where a restaurant used to be. And James is like, well, that should be Costco. Like, that should be, oh, we're putting new fields behind the high school. Yeah, that should be a Costco. Like, it should always be a Costco. So I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'd be close to it, but it is what it is. But Costco probably isn't happening anytime soon. Okay, what did we put for presidential polling? We'll go into, but Branford project. So part of an interesting thing happened with the Branford Rotary, which is interesting, about last week or so. I got a notification. I watch what all these groups do, and I get these notifications from members of the group on what's happening. And I look at their websites and who's speaking. And they had two members of the RTM, you're going to hear this name again, John Hartwell and Tracy Everson, scheduled to speak about Branford Fields and the police department. And I kind of like said, what in the world is happening here? Because it just didn't make any sense. Two people who led the fight against these projects are now going to give updates on these projects. And, you know, I understand it's political. Everybody expects one of these two people to run for first selectman against Cosgrove next year. It's kind of normal politics. They have been this way, kind of nasty about things and relatively dishonest. But the only reason I bring this up is because I just read this afternoon. Hi, Christy, how are you? A report a study that had been done. It's on the town website now, on our town fields, and it's not really about cost. It's about what improvements could be made to our town fields. Under the Cosgrove administration, there's no question we've done a ton with Foot Park. We're doing new fields now at Walsh that are really going to be incredibly helpful to a lot of people. And there's a goal to continue that, to do more. I would argue that the next park that we'll likely see a significant investment is Vets, and that's probably a year or two away. Vets Park needs it. Park needs it. In any event, when 3-4 years ago, the Board of Education started the process of trying to get fields at Walsh Intermediate School, it was not part of the high school renovation project because it was not going to get reimbursed from the state, so it was a separate project. They tried to get it moving forward under the previous Superintendent Hamlin Hernandez. That didn't go very far. So about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, Jamie Cosgrove said, okay, I'll start this project. We'll take it over on the town side. So those who don't know, Cosgrove's background is in construction and land management. So this is like right up his alley. And they went to a study, him and Alice Paluzzi. They got a report done. And now if you go to Walsh Intermediate School, and I've posted pictures on Branford 7, it's actually amazing. It's very, very impressive. The sheer size of these two all-purpose football fields, or soccer, all-purpose football fields is an oxymoron, an all-purpose sports field. So soccer, football, field hockey, all this stuff at the middle school will be huge. It's just a massive project, and it's an amazing project for the town. The construction company is Giordano, a Branford-based company. So this is just a really, really good project. When a project gets done, it starts with a building committee. The first selectman, they do a study, it goes to a building committee. Some funding is put out for the study, for the consultant, for the analysis, and it goes to committee after committee after committee. The plans are done, and then it goes to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance is probably the smartest people in the room in Branford. So you have Joe Mooney, who's the chairman, who used to head up the state's tax collection, the state's version of the IRS. When hospice was struggling, Barbara Pierce took over and brought in Joe Mooney to help with the finances. He's that kind of really smart, knows his stuff, logical, really, really great guy. If you don't know him, if you know him, I know that I'm being honest. So it goes there, and those members go through it and they analyze it, and they're the ones that really discuss, is the percentage right? Is the amount right? Does this make sense financially? Can the town afford this? Does it make sense into our long-term planning? And then they pass it. So we had that project, and we had another project, which was a renovation of the police station, which is about to start, I guess. And the purpose of the renovation of the police station is when that was built, there was some serious flaws in the foundation, which caused moisture problems. There's a bunch of other problems in the building. Looking at fixing that became, we have to fix a bunch of other things. Why not just get it done now? And that became a project. So we had these two projects going forward at the same time in Branford. We had fields going forward, and we had the police station going forward. So it passed the Board of Finance. And the next step is to move on to the RTM, the Representative Town Meeting. If you're not familiar with it, Branford has 30 members on this body, and it's called the RTM. And right now, the majority are Democrats. It's a very close majority, but majority are Democrats. But they put out a press release, and it was just beyond comprehension stupid. But a press release that literally said, if the town passed this, we would have a 4% increase every single year for the next 5 years. Now, this is just made up gibberish. They were trying to fight it, trying to stop the project. But here's what's amazing about this project. I have covered Branford news. We started Branford 7 at the end of 2009. So we're talking about 14, 15 years now. Been at Branford about 17 years. I've never seen a 4% increase. It's never happened. You may know that we passed a $90 million middle school. We have passed $12.5 million senior centers. We have passed major projects that have happened in town and still never come remotely close to 4% a year. There was no chance of us ever hitting 4% increase. And to put out a press release and to put it out to your members to fight this project, because if this passes, it's going to be a 4% increase for 5 consecutive years, is just spewing garbage. Now, we talk about lies in the presidential race from Trump or Harris or whatever it is. This was just like, what planet are you on? There were department heads that were like, where are these numbers coming from? And all of us that have an understanding of economics, Board of Finance members, the first selectmen, looked at itself like, what the hell is this? It's just made it up. And I'll tell you the truth, on social media, I posted, this is nuts. And I had Democrats I had never seen before on the Democratic Town Committee calling me every name in the book. I got messages calling me, you're an asshole, you're lying. This is just nonsense. It's just made up, which tells us a lot about political bias and how people want to believe what they want to believe instead of actually looking at facts. But never, if you can pass a high school at $90 million and not get a 4% increase, and you're still getting increases in the 1%, 1.5% for the most part, passing fields in a police station for a small fraction of that isn't going to get you to 4%. So Tracy Everson put this out. She's the majority leader of the Democratic Party and on the RTM. Clearly false. We all knew it was false. Then the item goes to the RTM to be heard. And instead of just accepting the item, they put it directly on the agenda. So everybody goes to the next meeting and says, okay, we're going to hear this at this meeting. And then they delay it. We're not going to hear it at this meeting. And they're acting like, why is this a big deal? Because you put it on the agenda. When you put it on the agenda, it's actionable. So all these parents show up and hear all this nonsense from Democrats saying, just all these concerns, what have you. At the same time, John Hartwell is getting up and he's giving these presentations saying the town is saving too much money, which is another thing that's absurd. And I wrote about that. We'll talk about that a little more in detail later on. So clearly they're fighting this project. So the next meeting comes and they're getting it from every parent known to man, right? Everybody is saying, this is just crazy. Parents are showing up saying, why are you delaying this? What are you doing with this massive amount of false information? So it gets to the thing. They give their great speeches on how they support all this stuff. And suddenly they all vote for it, except for one. One person didn't like the field material or something like that. So they all vote for it and have worked very diligently the last few months to rewrite history and say, basically, we were always for this. We never tried to fight this. I had what the moderator told me, this is completely false that you're saying you were trying to fight this. You put out a press release. You put out this information. There are conversations all over social media of people talking about this false information. Oh my God, if we pass these fields and if we give the police department a new police station, we're going to get a 4% increase for 5 years, which is just made up. You might as well say aliens are going to come down from the sky. There is no basis whatsoever in anything that was said. And now they're working diligently. And so they scheduled themselves to go talk to the Rotary. I have to give, it got to me later that the Rotary, we were going to write about it, but the Rotary somehow said, no, let's not do that. Or somebody got smart. And Rotary is made up of a lot of very, very good people. The Rotary does amazing things in the town. There is nothing I would ever have negative to say about the Rotary. But it's a lot of people, and sometimes those people are far right or far left, and they have an agenda and they want to get people to speak. But the fact that they were scheduled to not just speak to the Rotary, but to speak specifically about the police station and the fields, a project they very publicly fought and are trying to walk back, was just crazy to me. But that's the nature of politics. The nature of politics is to just rewrite history. The facts really don't matter much, and that's both parties. It's not just one. I know everybody hate Trump. He's making stuff up. So are the Democrats. Everybody's doing the same stuff. And the interesting thing about politics is the same as religion. There's very little barrier to entry in politics. If you are a horrible human being, but you want to get involved in politics, you can very likely show up at an RTC or a DTC meeting, a Republican town committee or Democratic town committee, and get involved. And not only get involved, be active and move up the ranks and be respected by others just by being there. There is such a vacuum of leadership in many of these organizations, a shortage of actual members. Let's put it this way. In Branford, and Branford is not the exception here, the RTM is 30 people. So that means all of those people usually have two people running, a Democrat and a Republican. They can only run the max. So I forgot the exact number is, but you might end up needing like 40, 45, 50 people to run for these seats. It's hard to find 50 people in a town who want to take the time to go at night to these meetings and answer constituent problems and research all these issues. It's not easy to find it. So when you find a live body walking in, you don't really care who they are. The barrier is non-existent. There's no test to fill out. Nobody does a background check. It's just, you want to put your name on a ballot? Great. We have somebody who's eager. We have somebody who's willing to do this. And that's what happens. And so you end up with people who are not from the town, making decisions for a town that they have no real connection to. And they care far more about getting their party ahead than getting the town in good shape. Now, Branford's in really good shape now based on who the leaders are. And many of the logical Democrats have left the Democratic Town Committee, and they are pretty much Cosgrove supporters at this point. But at some point, this has to go the other way. Somebody has to fix the Democratic Party. And right now, with John Hartwell there, it's just not going to happen. But in any event, it's just an interesting spin on what happens. We often look and say, wow, what happens nationally is terrible. In politics, this is a nasty game. It can happen in a town, too. And even we talk sometimes about Bridgeport, what's happened there in the last couple of years, West Haven, what's happened there in the last couple of years. That could creep into towns like Branford and Guilford and Madison on a more regular basis if those who are not town people who are putting the town first are not the people who are left to be in charge. And so we have those forces in Branford. We have them in many towns along the shoreline. Let's hope it stays that way, that those people are kept at bay. And the people who actually give a shit, that actually give a damn about the town, want the town to do well, want it to keep its charm, keep the flavor that we have here, those are the people that are in power. And so that brings me to the topic I wanted to talk about yesterday, and that is presidential polling. And so I'm asked pretty much every day, although I'm sure everybody else is having the exact same conversations, is who do you think is going to win the election? So I'm going to tell you what I do when I'm analyzing this. And first is I go to Real Clear Politics. I'm going to pull it up now. And I go to the poll averages. And the reason I go to averages is you never want to go to any one single poll. Most single polls have their different biases and they have much other issues we'll talk about in a second. But the Real Clear average, politics average right now is Harris leads by 1.9 points. And so most in the media will say Harris is ahead and she's winning and a lot of momentum. And she certainly has momentum in the polls. There's no question about that. So 1.9 points. Now, here's the interesting aspects that we didn't have to take into consideration. On this exact day, 4 years ago, Joe Biden had a 7-point lead in the national polls. On this exact day, September 4th, 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton had a 3.9 lead in the national polls. Now, both won the national vote. So they were both leading, and they both ended up winning. The problem is Biden ended up winning by the polling that finished right about the election time. He was almost up 10 or 11 points. He ended up winning by 4.5 points, 5 points in that ballpark. Clinton won by a much closer margin than the polls showed for her. So the polls were off 4 to 5 points in favor of the Democrat. They underestimated Trump support. Now we knew this obviously after Clinton happened. Everybody was shocked. I did not expect that to happen. I thought Clinton was going to be the president. Biden, a little bit different story, but still they're off 3 or 4 points in the national polls. Harris is ahead in the polls 1.9. If we adjust for what all the polls were off 4 years ago and 8 years ago, I would say Trump's ahead. And the problem is the national vote always is going to favor the Democrat. So if Trump's ahead on the national vote, so let's just say Harris is showing on Real Clear Politics 1.9%, Trump is very likely, in my opinion, this is just my analysis, up 1 or 2 points, and that's not getting measured. We have some really interesting things happening that this one, too many self-storage units and giant luxury apartments in town of Branford. I will talk about that in 1 second because it is an interesting topic to talk about. But first on the polls, so you have this problem of very likely the media is saying she's ahead, she's ahead. Technically, the numbers show she's ahead. Do those numbers accurately represent what's happening in the country? I don't think so. The second aspect is there is simply no way for pollsters who are very smart people. All these pollsters are political scientists, very statisticians, very intelligent people. You're used to measuring presidential politics when you have two candidates running against each other that you know for the last year. You have a huge boost in enthusiasm based on an unprecedented action on the Democratic side. So the polls are going to have a hard time tempering the enthusiasm gap that you're going to have on the Democratic side. Democrats can't wait to answer polls. They're enthusiastic to answer polls. They went from absolutely dead, thinking they were going to get crushed, supporting Biden, who couldn't debate properly, to now we have a viable chance. We have somebody with energy. We have somebody out there. That energy is through the roof. The Republican side, they're locked in. They're Trump supporters. They know where they're going. They're also less likely to answer a poll. Most Trump supporters are not all that supportive of government, or definitely not that trusting of government. So the idea that a bunch of phone calls are going to come in from Quinnipiac or Marquette or Rasmussen or the Wall Street Journal asking who they're going to vote for, they're more likely to say the wrong name than give the right name. They're very unlikely to answer that question. A third factor is that Trump support tends to skew older. Well, older people are harder to get a hold of. The phones in their house, they're not answering anymore. Those are becoming obsolete. And the likelihood of them going to an online poll or answering something through their phone, they're told constantly, don't click anything, don't go any near it. They're not going to answer that question. So my gut feeling, now this all can change on the 10th when the debate happens, but my gut is that Trump's ahead. And if he's ahead, after the Democrats just had their biggest boost with their convention and this huge name switch from Biden to Harris, Harris should be up 8-9 points right now in the polling. She's up 1.9. If her performance is not absolutely outstanding on the 10th, this is going to be a tough election for the Democrats. The polling won't show that. The media is saying the opposite. There's all this momentum on the side. Yes, there's momentum, but she is not even beating Hillary's numbers, and Hillary had terrible likability numbers. People knew Hillary. They didn't like her. And Harris isn't even beating those numbers when it comes to polling head-to-head with Trump right now. Yes, if you watch CNN or MSNBC, they'll tell you Democrats are way ahead. I'm not seeing it, and I don't understand why the polls are telling me the same story. They were off at least 4 points 4 years ago, 3 points or 2.5 to 3 points 8 years ago, and now you have unbelievable circumstances that have never happened before this election season. There is no way pollsters are keeping up with that variation, that there's simply nothing to compare to. That's going to be the question. So we can watch momentum in the polls, and every day we'll talk about the updates and where it's going until you get to next week, and that debate will be one hell of a discussion. I do want to talk about This comment: too many self-storage units in giant luxury apartments in town of Branford. You know, there's a question on when it comes to apartments. The world has changed. Years ago, you went to high school, you got a job at a factory, or got a job somewhere, and you stayed in that job your whole life. That's different now. Now, people aren't getting married or staying together. So you have a lot of solos traveling like crazy. Houses are too expensive because people who have money will pay anything for a house. And everybody else is either divorced or separated or living life on their own. So the demand for apartments is skyrocketing. We have a transient, there's a group of people that are going to live in Connecticut and then New York and then California and then through their career move 8, 9 different places. The go in one place and stay there doesn't exist anymore. So you have more people coming in, which is good with these apartments because they're not coming in with kids. These are professionals. So if you need help for your restaurants, if you need help for your stores, if you want economic development, people to spend money, people coming into those luxury apartments is a good thing. And it doesn't add a lot of stress to the school system because many of these people don't have children. When they move from apartment to apartment to apartment, they also need one other thing: storage. They need a place to put this stuff. So you're going to see this increase of apartments over housing, over normal single family homes. But with those apartments is going to come this need for storage. They're going from place to place to place. Not everything they had fits in a new place or vice versa. And that's always going to be the case. Branford's economy is actually helped by this. You have far more people walking downtown, going to restaurants. I mean, I've been in restaurants, and if you've been to Rosso Vino in the last, I don't know, year, it's packed every night. You know, Pasta Cozy has a good crowd every night. Cafe Fiore has a good crowd every night. I don't know if Branford would have supported all of these restaurants just 5, 6, 7 years ago or before the pandemic. So there are good things that are happening when you have these apartments, but with those apartments come storage units, and it's just the nature of the beast. You know, a single person moves from San Diego to Connecticut to work at Yale, and they move into an apartment and they can't fit all this stuff. They're going to get a storage unit for it. So from an economic development standpoint, it's actually a good thing. I hear a lot of people talk about traffic. Our overall population has not increased significantly. I think it's probably the last numbers that were done were probably a couple of years ago, but in the last couple of years, maybe we've seen some, but the traffic has not been significantly increased. You don't have a lot more cars than you've ever had before. But we have bad times and the highway holds up or what have you. But the increase in people in the town who are single or couples without children is higher. And we're seeing that. We're seeing actually economic benefits to that. We will talk tomorrow a little bit more about restaurants. And that's my marketing. You know, it's what I do with a lot of different restaurants, a lot of different businesses in town. But we're seeing a lot of turnover in restaurants. We've got to look at some of the mistakes that are being made. You know, Branford is a town that likes comfortable, casual places to sit with comfort food. And so that's a large part of what makes success in this town. But I hear a lot of people say that the same thing. There's too many self-storage units. There's too many luxury apartments in town. I don't know what luxury is anymore because, you know, a normal apartment going for $2,600, $2,700 used to be luxury. I don't think that's considered luxury anymore. That's just what it is. So a lot of new apartments happening. There's no question about that. But they are, and the other thing about the apartments, everybody's talking about the apartments that are right next to the train station. The state put a lot of emphasis in the last decade on transit-oriented development, which is development around train stations. They want apartments near train stations. They want people to be able to live in a place, get on a train, even possibly not even have a car, and go to work, go to the city, what have you. So there was a huge push from the state in this last decade to have development right around a train station. So I can't knock that too much. It's kind of the end result of a push that has come politically from the state level to have that kind of development be there. The one by Days Inn, that's a massive improvement. I will take that over the Days Inn that was there all day long. I'm sure the police would as well, based on the drugs and the prostitution calls they used to get for that facility. And that's right on an exit ramp as well. So while it's easy to say there's just too much development, smart development is what you're actually seeing happen. You're seeing development near train stations. You're seeing apartments near a train station, near exit ramps. You're seeing, you know, on the water. Get high prices for those apartments. Those people that are coming in usually have no kids, so there's not a lot of pressure on the school systems. You are bringing money into the town without taxing the forces that we have. And so I would argue that it's a very good thing economically. I get that there are times it looks a little busy, there's a little bit too much, but many more luxury apartments and single family homes all over the state, not just in town. 100% correct. That's the nature of our new economy. People are not going to a place and staying there anymore. They're not just settling. Someone works at Yale for 5 or 6 years, and then they become a traveling nurse, and then they go to Florida, and then they go here. And it used to be you got married at 22. That's not happening now either. So you have a lot more transient nature in all of our workforce around the country, but Connecticut is right in the center of that, between Boston and New York City. So these apartments are part of the new reality. And they actually, if we look at it from an economic development standpoint, is helpful. Now, if that ever switches the other way, if there's ever this push to get single family homes again, well, you could probably live in an apartment for $1,000 a month and be in good shape. That's probably a long way away. Okay, that being said, I'll leave it for there. Tomorrow we will talk more about restaurants, what's opening, closing, that sort of stuff in town. Until then, I hope you have a great night. I'm going to go out and meet someone for a drink down at the Salt Brick Prime. And until I see you again, see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.